The air in the arena was a thick, electric soup of human energy. 20,000 souls, a pulsating organism of cheers and devotion, hung on the words of the man in the center of the squared circle. Paul Levesque, known to the world as Triple H, stood under the stark white glare of the spotlights, not as the sledgehammer-wielding barbarian king of his past, but as the architect of the future. His suit was impossibly sharp, a tailored armor of dark gray silk that cost more than the cars most people in the nosebleeds drove. He held the microphone with the casual confidence of a man who owned not just the ring he stood in, but every cable, camera, and contract associated with it. He was the chief content officer of the game, and he was in absolute control. "This is my promise, my vision, my guarantee," he purred into the mic, his voice a smooth, practiced baritone that resonated through the arena's massive speaker system. "An era of transparency, of opportunity, an era where the glass ceiling isn't just broken, it's obliterated. For you," he gestured expansively to the roaring crowd, "the WWE Universe." It was a masterful performance of corporate leadership. He was selling them a dream, and they were buying it wholesale. He was no longer just a wrestler. He was a visionary, a titan of industry shaping the very landscape of sports entertainment. His smile was serene, the look of a man who had conquered all his worlds, from the brutal canvas of the ring to the polished mahogany of the boardroom. In this moment, the universe was orderly, predictable, and firmly in his grasp. But chaos is a patient predator. It waits for moments of perfect calm to strike. It began not with a bang, but a ripple. A subtle shift in the sector of the crowd to the left of the main entrance ramp. A few heads turning, then a few more. A single fan stood up, pointing, their face a mask of disbelief. A low murmur started, a dissonant hum that began to cut through the unified cheer for Triple H. On the Titantron, the director smartly kept the camera tight on Triple H's face, ignoring the disturbance, trying to starve it of the oxygen of attention. But it was too late. The murmur was growing into a buzz, the buzz into a roar of confusion and excitement. Triple H, ever the professional, felt the shift. His smile tightened by a millimeter. He could feel the energy in the room changing, the focus of 20,000 people being pulled away from him. It was like a magnet had been activated somewhere in the building, and he was no longer north. His eyes flickered nervously towards the source of the commotion. What he saw made the corporate composure slide from his face like a mask made of ice in the sun. Through the sea of people, a figure was moving with the brutal, unstoppable purpose of a shark cutting through a school of fish. There was no music, no pyrotechnics, no grand entrance. There was only a woman in a black hoodie and dark jeans, her face a thundercloud of pure, unadulterated rage. Security guards in their bright yellow shirts converged on her, forming a weak, ineffectual dam against a flash flood. She didn't fight them, not really. She simply moved through them, shrugging off their hands, her momentum and sheer force of will casting them aside like driftwood. The crowd erupted. The name, chanted by a few, then a few hundred, then thousands, became a deafening roar that shook the very foundations of the arena. "Ronda! Ronda! Ronda!" Ronda Rousey vaulted the barricade with the explosive grace of a predator clearing an obstacle. She landed on the padded floor with a soft thud, her eyes locked on the man in the ring. They were not the eyes of Rowdy Ronda, the smiling, fan-friendly Olympian. They were the cold, flat eyes of a killer. The eyes of a woman who had made a career of breaking limbs and shattering wills in the unforgiving confines of a steel cage. The last vestiges of Triple H's corporate speech died in his throat. This was not a planned segment. This was not sports entertainment. This was a breach. This was real. She stormed up the steel steps, slid under the bottom rope, and rose to her feet, occupying the center of his ring, his universe, as if she owned it. The air crackled, thick with unspoken history and imminent violence. For a long, tense moment, they just stood there, a study in contrasts. The polished executive in his suit and the feral fighter in her street clothes. The master of the game and the one piece on the board that refused to be played. Triple H found his voice first, layering it with as much condescending authority as he could muster. "Ronda, what in the hell do you think you're doing? You don't work here. Security—" Before he could finish, Ronda's hand shot out and snatched the microphone from his grasp. Her knuckles were white. She stepped into his personal space, so close he could feel the heat radiating from her, the tremors of rage that coursed through her body. Her voice, when she spoke, was not a yell. It was something far more terrifying, a low, guttural rasp, laced with venom. "You're right, Hunter," she seethed, using his real name like a curse. "I don't work here. I don't punch a clock in your fantasy factory. I don't pretend for a living. I left this place. I tried to wash the stench of its politics and its lies off of me. I was home, I was happy, and then last Tuesday, I made the mistake of turning on the television." Triple H's jaw clenched. He knew exactly where this was going. "I watched my friend, my sister, a woman who has bled and sacrificed more for this business than anyone in that locker room, Shayna Baszler, get screwed." Ronda's voice started to rise, cracking with emotion. "I watched her fight her way to the top of a mountain that was designed to be impossible for someone like her to climb. Someone real. Someone who doesn't fit the mold of your corporate-approved poster girls. She had it. She had that championship in her hands, the culmination of a lifetime of work. And then what happened, Hunter? She took a menacing step forward, forcing Triple H to take an involuntary step back. The crowd roared at the display of dominance. A referee gets accidentally knocked down. A mysterious figure slides a chair into the ring. A convenient distraction allows your hand-picked, merchandise-moving champion to steal a victory. You think we're idiots? You think after all these years we don't know how the machine works? That wasn't a mistake. That was an order. An order that came from the man in the expensive suit. An order that came from you." She jabbed a finger hard into his chest, the impact surprisingly forceful. "You didn't just screw a competitor. You didn't just protect your investment. You screwed my family. And that is a line you do not get to cross." Triple H swatted her hand away, his face now a mask of cold fury. The corporate executive was fading, and the cerebral assassin was beginning to surface. "You are way out of line," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You're making baseless accusations on my show, in my ring. What happened to Shayna was a controversial but official outcome. You're emotional. You don't understand the complexities of what we do here. Now I'm giving you one chance to turn around, walk out of this ring, and go back to your farm before you do something you'll regret." He gestured subtly with his head, and on the apron, a dozen burly security guards began to climb, forming a wall between the ring and the outside. Ronda looked at the line of security, then back at Triple H. And then she laughed. It wasn't a sound of humor. It was a raw, bitter, terrifying sound that echoed through the arena. It was the laugh of a woman who had been pushed past her breaking point and had found a strange, liberating freedom on the other side. "Regret?" she echoed, her eyes wide and wild. "You want to talk about regret? You're going to regret thinking these cosplaying mall cops could ever be a threat to me. You think I came here for a job? For a payday? You think I want a match at the next pay-per-view?" She dropped the microphone, the heavy thud on the canvas punctuating her statement. The time for talking was over. "I'm not here to talk to the COO," she declared, her voice now projecting across the silent, captivated arena. "I'm here to call out the King of Kings. I'm calling out the leather jacket-wearing, sledgehammer-swinging, cerebral assassin." Or was he just a myth, a character you played on TV before you traded your spine for a stock portfolio and a corner office? "I want a fight, Hunter, an unsanctioned fight. No rules, no ropes, no referee to save you, just me and you. I want to find out right now, in front of the whole world, if there's any of the game left, or if it's just Paul Levesque, the corporate coward." She ripped off her hoodie, throwing it to the ground. Underneath, she wore a simple black tank top, revealing the toned, powerful arms of a world-class athlete. She bounced on the balls of her feet, her hands clenched into fists. It was a direct, undeniable challenge, an invitation to war. The arena became a pressure cooker of anticipation. Every single person was on their feet, screaming, begging for him to accept. For a moment, it looked like he would. A flicker of the old fire ignited in Triple H's eyes. His legacy was being questioned on the grandest stage. He slowly, deliberately, began to unbutton the jacket of his suit. The crowd's roar intensified, reaching a fever pitch. This was it. The moment the corporate world would collide with the brutal reality it governed. But then, he stopped. He looked at Ronda, at the chaos she represented. He looked at his hands, clean and manicured. He was an executive. He was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He didn't get into street fights with disgruntled former employees. He let out a short, condescending chuckle, a sound of pure dismissal. He rebuttoned his jacket. "You're delusional," he scoffed, "and you're trespassing." He turned his back on her, a sign of ultimate disrespect. He faced his security team. "Get her out of my ring, now!" It was the biggest mistake he could have made. By turning his back, he signaled to Ronda that he didn't even consider her a physical threat worth facing. He had reduced her to a nuisance, a problem for his hired help to solve. For Ronda, that was an insult worse than any punch. A predatory smile, cold and sharp, spread across her face. "Wrong answer," she whispered to herself. The first security guard, a barrel-chested man who outweighed her by 100 pounds, stepped forward cautiously. "Ma'am, let's go. Don't make this difficult." Difficult was an understatement. In a motion so fluid it was hard to follow, Ronda closed the distance. She dipped her shoulder, pivoted on her heel, and locked her arm around his waist. He was airborne before he even knew what was happening. A perfect, textbook ogoshi, a full hip-wheel judo throw. The guard sailed over her hip, his body arcing through the air before he crashed over the top rope and onto the floor below with a sickening thud. The crowd gasped, a single, unified sound of shock. A second guard lunged, trying to grab her from behind. It was a rookie mistake. Ronda dropped to one knee, seizing the arm he offered her. She rolled onto her back, wrapping her legs around his torso and neck, and straightened his arm with a terrifying snap of her hips. The armbar was locked in. It wasn't a pro wrestling hold, it was a clinical, anatomical submission designed to destroy a joint. The guard didn't have time to think. Instinct took over. He screamed and tapped frantically on the mat, on her leg, on anything he could reach. Ronda held it for an extra, punishing second, her eyes burning a hole into Triple H's back before she released the hold. The man writhed on the canvas, clutching his elbow, his face a contorted mask of agony. Now, 4 more guards, realizing the gravity of the situation, swarmed her at once. It made no difference. This was her world. She was an apex predator, and they were clumsy, panicked prey. The first one to reach her was met with a knee to the solar plexus that folded him in half. As he doubled over, she grabbed the back of his head and drove him face first into the canvas. The second threw a wild punch, which she slipped with ease, grabbing his wrist and spinning under his arm, using his momentum to throw him head over heels. He landed in a heap in the corner. The third guard hesitated. A fatal error. Ronda exploded forward, lifting the stunned man onto her shoulders with shocking strength. For a brief, horrifying moment, he was suspended in the air, a look of pure terror on his face. She ran a few steps and slammed him down with a devastating piper's pit, the move taught to her by her mentor, the legendary Rowdy Piper. The impact shook the ring. The fourth and final guard, seeing his colleagues utterly dismantled, froze dead in his tracks. He looked at the carnage, then at the ferocious woman in the center of it all. He looked into her eyes and saw a promise of absolute violence. He did the only sane thing he could. He slowly backed away, raised his hands in surrender, and tumbled out of the ring, choosing retreat over annihilation. Silence. A stunned, awestruck silence fell over the 20,000 people. The chaos had been so fast, so brutal, so real, that it had short-circuited their brains. They had just witnessed a one-woman demolition crew tear through a security detail as if they were made of paper. Ronda stood alone in the center of the ring, breathing heavily, not from fatigue, but from pure, unspent adrenaline. The bodies of the guards were scattered around her like fallen pawns on a chessboard. She slowly, deliberately turned her head. Triple H, who had turned back around just in time to witness the final, brutal act of defiance, stood on the ring apron, his hand still resting on the top rope. The smugness was gone. The condescension was gone. The corporate mask was shattered. In its place was a cocktail of emotions, raw and unfiltered for the world to see. Utter disbelief, white-hot fury, and deep in his eyes, buried beneath the layers of power and ego, a tiny, undeniable flicker of fear. She hadn't laid a single finger on him. She hadn't needed to. She had destroyed his authority, humiliated him in his own kingdom, and proven that her threat was not just words. It was a physical reality he was not prepared for. She raised a single, trembling finger and pointed it directly at his face. No words were spoken. None were needed. The message was delivered with the force of a sledgehammer. You are next. The camera zoomed in on Triple H's face, capturing the moment he realized he was no longer in control, that he had unleashed a force he could not manage with a contract or a memo. The show's theme music crashed in, jarring and loud. The screen faded to black, leaving the world with one burning question and one terrifying image of a woman who had come back not to play a game, but to end one.